So I know that I said that I would talk about these movies in one video together, but I have enough to say about this one that it deserves its own video. Normally I don't like the last installation of a book trilogy being split into 2 movies, but at least for this first part, they put a good amount of information in, and it's not like they stretched something that just couldn't be 2 movies. So with all the splitting talk out of the way, let's get into the actual movie. Start out the movie with Katniss hiding in a vent, having snuck away from her hospital bed. Katniss is at her lowest point here, having to be dragged back to her bed. I said in my last Hunger Games video that establishing Katniss dealing with her trauma was a big factor, so I like how they carry it over here. Katniss spends half of the movie being completely distraught, so this is a pretty good way to start things off. Katniss gets out of her bed and goes to see Finnick. Finnick is also in the hospital, which is a little odd. Finnick looked completely fine and seemed unwounded at the end of the movie. I would assume he didn't run into the careers after leaving Katniss at the tree, because if he had, the Capitol would have captured him just like they presumably captured Emporia. They really don't even mention Emporia at all, and it didn't seem like she died in the arena. I guess Finnick could just be getting checked out for a night, but it seems like Katniss has been in the hospital for a while, at least long enough to have a favorite hiding spot. Once Katniss is out of the hospital, President Coin, leader of District 13, asks her to be the spokesperson for the rebellion. Katniss is still mad about Peeta being left behind and said that she should have saved Peeta, which is true. Peeta is an extremely gifted speaker and was really beneficial for the Capitol. Katniss really isn't that convincing. Katniss goes back to District 12 to see the destruction for herself. She steps on a skull walking up a hill, only to get to the top and see dozens of bodies laid out in what used to be the road. We see the horrors of what happened here set in with Katniss, and she begins to break down. This makes the tragedy of what happened here feel more real, and even though we didn't get quite enough time developing District 12, you can still feel the loss. They focus on the Justice Building sign, but because we never got the scene of Katniss talking about the building and how it fits into the marriage traditions of the district, you would never know why they're focusing on this. I don't know how Katniss has the only house that wasn't destroyed, but the possibility that Snow told the bombers to avoid that house specifically isn't that crazy to me. Katniss finding a white rose in the same room she talked to Snow in makes that a lot more likely. We then cut to Snow sitting in his house planning his speech. This was my favorite cutaway in the 3 movies I've seen so far. We get to see how calculating Snow really is, making sure to manage every little word he says, down to the last syllable. He gives a speech denouncing the rebellion and orders executions of the rebel leaders who were caught, and says associating with the Mockingjay symbol is punishable by death. While Gale and Katniss are eating, Peeta comes on the TV. Peeta calls for a ceasefire, which makes the others in the dining hall yell and call him a traitor. Why are they mad at him for saying that? Do they think the Capitol would let him support the rebellion on TV? You might say that they just don't know how the Capitol works, but even Coin is hesitant to pardon him, and she has Plutarch who used to live there as an advisor. Gale also decides to act like Peeta is a traitor later on in the movie, which makes even less sense. Gale should know that Peeta has Katniss as his main priority, and the Capitol wants to kill Katniss, so Peeta is clearly just trying to ride things out. Katniss has a nightmare remembering a night on the train with Peeta, and because of the nightmare, Katniss realizes that she needs to protect Peeta, and the best way to do so is to take Coin's offer. She makes her demands, and in doing so, shows Coin just how good she can be when she's passionate. Katniss's first attempt at shooting a prop bow is embarrassingly bad. I always enjoy scenes in movies where great actors have to pretend to be bad actors. When they cut to Katniss and the leaders of the rebellion watching the prop bow, you can feel the disappointed tension in the room. The leaders decide to send Katniss out into the field, and this is a great writing choice. We get a decent bit of action, which is a staple for these movies, and we also get to see how bad things are in the district from Katniss's perspective. Katniss arrives in District 8 to shoot with her new crew and gets taken into a hospital. Apparently Charlie is in the scene, but I could not find him at all. Turns out it's only his arm that's in the movie. Outside of that, Katniss walks through the hospital and manages to inspire the wounded people there to keep fighting, but a camera catches her walking into the hospital. Snow sees the footage and decides to destroy the hospital because, in his words, they committed treason. This is the dumbest move possible and completely out of character. The people in that hospital are there because they are wounded and probably can't move. Killing all those innocents will only radicalize people further and give them an Alamo to rally behind. This is someone who shouldn't ever make a move that will give his opposition a symbol unless absolutely necessary, because he is dealing with the fallout of that happening before. When the bombers arrive, the crew gets instructions on how to get away, and Katniss doesn't listen to them, runs away from the group, and Gale is the only one to chase after her. As of right now, she is the most important figure in the rebellion. Everyone in the crew should be chasing her. They eventually follow, but they walk to the two of them, who are standing by a hole in the wall 10 feet away from people who are shooting at bombers. These people are supposed to be the elite of District 13, and they just lose their minds. Once the hospital is destroyed, Katniss gives a speech. The difference between this attempt and the last is pretty big, and we get to see what Plutarch saw in Katniss. Katniss has the ability to truly inspire people when she really tries to. Katniss goes back into 12 with the crew, and Gale gives a story on what happened. The crew breaks for lunch, and one of the crew members asks Katniss to sing, and she chooses to sing The Hanging Tree.
Stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree?
The crew uses her singing as background music to a propo. Side note, this is a crazy editing timeline. We cut to an attack on a dam in District 5, and it's really realistic. Peacekeepers have rifles, obviously they're going to mow down a lot of people, but if there's a big enough crowd, eventually they'll get overrun. The dam exploding knocked out the power in the capital, giving District 13 time to save the captured victors. Before they can leave, Peeta comes on the TV and warns Katniss that the capital is coming, and because of that, people are able to get to the bomb shelter a lot faster. Katniss comes to the shelter and realizes Prim isn't there, so she leaves the shelter with a minute left before the blast doors close. At 30 seconds, she seems to be about halfway up the stairs. If she turned right around, she would barely make it into the shelter. She then stops for 15 seconds. The PA system calls out that it's been 15 seconds, and she doesn't head back the way she came until the clock reaches 8 seconds. Why not have her leave at 2 minutes, see Prim at a minute left, and have them immediately run down to the shelter? The PA was added in post. This would have been an easy fix. This is a nitpick, but it's still a problem, especially when they drag out the counting for dramatic effect and you can tell in the moment that the clock is off. When the bombing is done, the crew goes outside to film Katniss, but the roses Snow had dropped freak her out so much that she runs back to her hiding spot. Haymitch finds her and tells her that the victors in the capital are going to be rescued. Katniss heads to the control room and sees BT taking over the airwaves using Finnick to clog the system. Just for Snow to call in and tell Katniss he knows what is happening, and he scrambles the signal to the team inside the capital, making it impossible for BT to reach them. This move made me regain faith in Snow's ability as leader, and it shows just how out of her depth Katniss is. Snow is leading her on by a thread the whole time, and she's just stumbling along. Also, it kinda looks like he's holding whatever screen he's talking to, which looks a little wonky. The rescue attempt is pretty tense, and things continue to ramp up, and then they just cut away. I was really looking forward to seeing them pull the victors out of their cells, and they just went for revealing them at the end. I get that they wanted to make you question whether or not Gale and Peeta would make it out, but even if you haven't read the books, there's no way that at least one of them wouldn't survive. Maybe they could have had the rescue team pull Annie and Joanna out, then wait until they get back to reveal Peeta. That way you get the best of both worlds, and we can get a first-hand glimpse into just how bad their treatment at the hands of the Capitol was. When the team gets the victors back home, Katniss walks in and Gale tells her Peeta is down the hall. Peeta looks absolutely horrible and attacks her as soon as she speaks. I like the fact that no one can pull him off and he has to be knocked out. It speaks to how strong he really is. Even after all this time being malnourished and tortured, he still has enough left in the tank to do all this. Once Katniss wakes up from being choked out, she is back in a hospital bed, unable to talk or move her head. Plutarch visits her and tells her that Peeta has been hijacked and they don't know if they can fix him. This is a great ending point for the movie. The thing that Katniss used to protect Peeta, that being her voice, got taken away by Peeta. The movie ends as Coin gives her speech and Katniss watches Peeta flail in his bed.
Are you coming to the tree? They strung up a man.
First off, I want to say that I'm glad that there are no shots in this movie that were an affront to my eyes. Outside of the whole Emboria and Justice Building thing, there weren't any deviations from the book that made the movie worse. All in all, this is a pretty good adaptation, and it's the second best I've seen so far, right behind Catching Fire. Everything is set for a pretty good conclusion, so we'll just have to see where they take it from here. That way we get the best of both worlds, and we can see a first-hand glimpse into just how bad their treatment at the hand of the Capitol. Oh my god.